on the drum kit, the more sonic problems you come across, mainly due to phase. The byproduct of sound waves hitting two microphones at different points in time and causing phase cancellation. I don't know if you understand what that means. You all know what that means? Okay. It's a little bit like applying an equaliser to something, but just a random equaliser. So you might find, if I put one microphone close to the snare drum and one back here, and I combine those two signals together, suddenly the snare drum, which sounded nice and bright in one microphone, starts to sound boxy and strange with the other. And by adjusting the relationship between those two signals, we have a whole bunch of sonic possibilities. So that's just one drum. I've got 3 toms, bass drum and cymbals here. So this is a minefield, but also a great challenge and a lot of fun if you know what you're doing. Back in the 60s and before that, people used to just mic up drum sets with 1 or 2 microphones. You know, they'd often just pick a good room, helps, you've got a nice big ambient space here. And they would generally put, say, a microphone back here, so you catch a little bit of everything. That's fine if you're playing like jazz music or something that's not involving huge amounts of dynamics, but since the birth of rock and roll and then dance music and the things that happened in the last 30 or 40 years with music, extreme dynamics have become really part of the sound that we're all used to. So if you want to get the maximum amount of impact out of this instrument or this group of instruments here, you really need to be able to focus in on what each part of it does and create definition. I'm also going to aim it at the snare drum as well, because I want to try and capture a little bit of the length on the snare. And I'm moving it up here because, like I explained, the further away you have the mic, the more of a balance you get across the signals. I'm also probably going to get quite a bit of ambience of this room, but we'll work with that. Trying to find the best balance of this cymbal. If I go down here, it's quite boomy and resonant. I'm getting a lot of kind of wum wum wum. If I go right over the top here, it's really bright and pingy. So I'm kind of aiming slightly across it, and again, trying to catch a little bit of the snare drum at the same time. Flipping the phase button in and out, just to see what kind of happens. Put them out of phase, and then I turn the 2 pans until I get to a point where they sound most weird, like, you know, not in relation to each other. And usually at that point, when you put the phase button back in, put them back into phase, you'll get a good stereo picture of the kit. So when I put it out of phase, the snare drum starts sounding a little bit boxy, getting more low frequencies, also affecting the bass drum too. If I put it back in phase, it's kind of a bit thin sounding now. So what I'm doing here is just flipping it in and out of phase, and also adjusting the balance with the other drums, just by pushing the fader up and down. It's really good to make use of the selection of microphones you've got as well. I mean, I know there are sort of, like I said already, there are kind of standard mics, but again, there's no real rules. These are often used on toms. They're actually pretty good on bass drums. They've got a low frequency roll off. You can actually remove low end. So if I want to get a little bit more attack off the kick drum, good sounding drum kits, you know, have a lot of tone to them, and that's really part of what you want to capture, not just the transients, the quick sounds. So I'm about half a foot away from the beater head in there. These are usually used on bass drums, but I've kind of got into chucking them on floor toms, because again, they're sort of bass drum instruments, so we can try and, because this tom is quite small, see if we can extract a little bit more low end off it by using a microphone that has a low frequency hump, which this does. You know what that means, it's got a boost in the low frequencies. Mics on toms if you've got a pad on them, like we were already talking about. But generally, if you need to sort of do it on a case by case basis. If your drum is quite loud and is going to thwack 7 shades of hell out of the drum kit, you're going to get tons of everything onto these mics, and you're not going to get a lot of definition. If you're recording more like a jazz drummer or a folk drummer, or something that's quite low level where the kit is already quite well balanced, condensers are really fantastic on toms and snares. You get a much fuller, rounder sound when you get the dialects. It sounds more real. Let's try Beta 57, which is hypercardioid pattern, quite a tight frequency pattern. If I point it here, I'm probably not going to get too much of this into it across the tom. Roughly where you hit it. You don't want to go too close because you'll kind of lose some of the resonance. The lower frequencies tend to take a little bit longer to hit the microphone, so if you want to get a bit of the boom of the drum, we'll move a little further back. Quite important getting the sound right as a sort of building block for the track, because even though you can go in and use plugins and stuff and chop everything around later, actually the sound you send back to the drummer, you know, what they're hearing in their headphones, what the band are reacting to, does alter the way they perform. If you just chuck mics up willy-nilly and don't really think about, if you get in a kind of, oh, I'll fix it later mentality, chances are what they're going to be hearing isn't as good as it could be. If you send them something that's absolutely slamming and fantastic, I mean, you can even do things like sending some of the drums to parallel compressors and recording things that are maybe you're not going to use, but you just get an exciting sound that they're all going to vibe off, and then you'll get a really great performance out of them. If you give them something that's sort of substandard or not as punchy or cool as it could be, you're not going to get the same performance out of them. Snares, particularly underside, it's quite amazing actually. You get most of the brightness off the underneath of it. If you put it on the top, you get the kind of whack and the thud. Again, if you've got two microphones either side of the drum, you need to look at the phase relationship. The diaphragms are facing each other basically. So I would listen to the drum and try and aim it at the point where they're striking it most. You know, it's going to be in the centre unless it's a sort of percussive drummer who's using the rims and that sort of thing. And then if you go underneath the kit, try and point the two mics at a kind of imaginary space in the air that would be in the centre of the drum, so that they're, you know, essentially facing each other, either like that or at kind of 90 degrees. And then you want to mess around with the phase button, but most likely they're going to work out of phase with each other. Probably you would flip the low mic out of phase, because the top mic's probably going to be catching a bit of the hi-hats and that sort of thing. You get a great full sound then. If you're getting too much rattle on the underside and it's not bleeding onto everything else, you can obviously gate the underside of the snare. So you're just getting the transient and not all the kind of buzz in between. I double mic toms quite a lot as well, same thing. Although weirdly in reverse, you get the low frequencies off the lower heads and more of the attack off the top. Again, same thing, check the phase of each of them. Yeah, you get absolutely fantastic. You know, if you want massive rock toms, double mic them, it's really cool. Again, you know, the more mics you add, the more potential phase problems you have, the more you might have to resort to gates and things in the mix to try and sort of stop everything just turning to mud. Bass drums, often double mic those too. I don't do all of this all the time, but there's quite a popular thing of having something like an SM57 or one of those Sennheiser mics, something that's not got too much of an extended low frequency range, and get it right in the inside of the drum, close to the beater head, so it's just maximum attack. You want to just go for the click. Also look at where it's angled so that you're not getting too much snare drum back through it, because if you want to compress and equalise it, you don't want it to affect the tone of the snare. If you think about it, the snare is actually very close to the beater head of the bass drum. Once you've got a cool sound with that, you can add a mic further back, the resonant head of the bass drum. Something we use quite a lot is NS10 speaker drivers. Anyone done that before? Yeah, we can try it later on. If you take I mean, the popular ones you use is the drivers from NS10 monitor speakers, but you whip the actual speaker cone out
and then use it as a mic,
and then put it in front of the bass drum, and you just get absolutely the most sub thing you've ever heard.
It's not the sound.
They've cottoned on and manufactured. It's not as good actually. Yeah, get the speaker. It's better. That also works with bass cabs as well. If you're lacking low frequencies, you know, pick something that's going to give you low end. And again, you know, you combine those two microphones together, and you get all the click and the attack of the beater head, and then the sub and resonance of the outer skin.